The rain came down in sheets, relentless and cold, drumming against the windshield as I pulled up to the Mercer estate. Through the blur of the wipers, the mansion looked like a fortress of light and laughter, untouched by the storm raging outside. I turned off the engine and reached for the thermos sitting beside me. Inside was Olivia's favorite chicken casserole, something warm to ease her nausea. My daughter was 3 months pregnant, fragile and exhausted, and all I wanted was to see her eat something. The sound of music and laughter drifted through the rain, muffled but unmistakable. They were having a party. I stepped out of the car, holding the thermos close, my coat instantly soaked. I rang the bell once. No answer. Again, longer this time, still nothing. A shiver crawled up my spine. I moved toward the side path that Olivia once showed me, a narrow gate that led to the backyard. It wasn't locked. I pushed it open, and that's when I saw her. My daughter was kneeling on the cold patio stones, drenched to the bone. The floral dress she had proudly tried on last week clung to her body, outlining the faint curve of her belly. Rain and tears ran together down her pale face. Her lips were trembling, her hands pressed over her knees as if she was praying for mercy. "Olivia," I ran to her, kneeling beside her. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked under the rain. "Mom, I only bought a maternity dress, that's all." That simple, broken sentence ignited something deep inside me. I wrapped my coat around her shoulders, lifted her into my arms, and carried her toward the back door. Years of taekwondo training came back in one motion. My legs swung forward and the door flew open with a deafening crack. The music stopped. Every face in the room turned toward me, soaked, furious, holding my daughter in my arms. "God will not forgive this cruelty," I said. And then, silence. The emergency lights flickered above as nurses rushed toward us, voices echoing through the sterile white corridor. Olivia's body was cold, her lips almost blue. They placed her on a gurney and disappeared behind swinging doors, leaving me alone in the waiting area with rainwater dripping from my hair onto the tile floor. I sat there, clutching the thermos I still hadn't let go of, my fingers stiff and numb. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, sharp and clean, yet all I could taste was bitterness. I stared at my trembling hands, and for a moment I wasn't in that hospital anymore. I was back in another place, another night drenched in rain. Years ago I stood on a taekwondo podium, the crowd cheering as gold shimmered around my neck. They called me the Falcon, the woman who could never be broken. My husband, Robert, stood in the crowd, smiling proudly. He was my coach, my partner, my anchor. Together we had built our lives around discipline, victory, and strength. But that illusion shattered the day I landed wrong during a spin kick and felt my knee snap like dry wood. The sound of applause faded into silence. The Falcon had fallen. Robert changed after that. The man who once believed in me became consumed by resentment. His words turned sharp, his love into poison. "You ruined everything," he'd mutter when drunk, staring at the empty medals on the wall. At first, I told myself it was grief. But grief doesn't leave bruises. Olivia was only 10 when she began standing between us, her small body trembling but defiant. "Stop, Dad. Don't touch her," she'd cry. I'll never forget that night, the rain, the crash of a vase, Robert's rage. When he pushed her aside, she fell, her head striking the corner of the table. Blood. A thin, red line across her forehead that never completely faded. That was the night I packed our bags and left. I built a new life from the ruins, promising myself that Olivia would never know the kind of pain I endured. But sitting in that hospital hallway, the promise felt broken. I had protected her from one monster only to see her crushed by another. The door creaked open. A nurse stepped out, her expression unreadable. "Miss Hale," she said softly, "the doctor will see you soon." I nodded, but my thoughts were miles away, trapped between past and present, between the woman I used to be and the mother I had become. And deep inside I felt something stir again, the same fire that once burned on the mat, the same fury that had carried me out of that marriage. I didn't know it yet, but this storm wasn't over. It was only beginning. The doctor appeared minutes later, his scrubs damp with sweat, his eyes weary behind fog glasses. He pulled the mask from his face and spoke quietly, as if afraid his words might shatter what little strength I had left. "Miss Hale," he began, "we did everything we could. But your daughter suffered severe hypothermia, which triggered premature contractions. I'm so sorry we couldn't save the baby." For a moment the world stopped moving, the hum of machines, the murmurs of nurses, even the rain outside all disappeared into a suffocating silence. The thermos slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a hollow clang, spilling soup across the white tiles. I didn't even look down. I couldn't. I don't remember how long I sat there staring at nothing, only that the doctor's voice had faded into an echo. My mind refused to believe it. My grandchild, the tiny life Olivia had spoken of with such wonder, was gone. When they finally let me into her room, she looked small against the white sheets. Her skin was pale, her hair damp and tangled. A thin IV line ran into her hand, carrying life drop by drop. I sat beside her, my own reflection trembling in the window pane. After hours that felt like days, her eyelids fluttered. She turned her head weakly toward me. The first thing she did was touch her stomach. Her hand froze. Her eyes searched mine, wide and terrified. I didn't have to say a word, she knew. A strangled sob escaped her lips. "Mom, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't make a scene. I still love him. He didn't mean to. It was just his mother. She hates me." Her words were like knives twisting inside my chest. Even in her pain, she was defending the man who had destroyed her. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her see. But I didn't. I took her hand, pressed it to my cheek, and forced my voice to stay steady. "Rest, sweetheart," I said softly. "We'll talk later." But deep down, I already knew this wasn't the end of the pain. It was only the beginning of my fight. 3 days passed. The hospital room smelled of disinfectant and wilted flowers. Olivia's phone stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the door, as if waiting for someone who would never come. Each time footsteps echoed down the hall, she looked up with a spark of hope, only to have it fade seconds later. On the third evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped out into the hallway and dialed Ethan's number. It rang twice before going straight to voicemail. His cheerful recorded voice hit me like a slap. "Hey, it's Ethan. Leave a message." I hung up and called his mother, Mrs. Mercer. She answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Mercer, this is Catherine," I began. "Olivia is." A sharp click cut me off. She had hung up. That was the moment the fire inside me reignited. I left the hospital that night with my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I drove straight to their house in Beverly Hills. When Ethan opened the door, he looked annoyed, as if I had interrupted his sleep. He stood there in his silk pajamas, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "What the hell are you doing here?" he asked lazily. "Why didn't you come to the hospital?" I shouted. "Do you even know what you've done? Olivia lost the baby because of you." He smiled, a slow, cruel smile that froze my blood. "Why would I go? Your daughter couldn't even keep a child alive. Maybe she should have stayed where she belonged instead of trying to play house with me." The air left my lungs. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to strike him, to throw that glass out of his hand, to scream until he understood what he'd destroyed. But then something changed. The fury inside me cooled into something sharper, clearer. My voice dropped, calm and deadly. "You'll regret those words, Ethan." He laughed, careless and drunk. "Go ahead, old woman. Nobody will believe you." I turned without another word and walked back into the rain. My legs felt weak, but my mind was razor sharp. I knew anger wouldn't win this battle. Evidence would. That was when I noticed the faint red blink of a new security camera mounted on the house across the street. It belonged to Mr. Walter Bennett, an old neighbor Olivia had mentioned once. He'd installed it recently to catch thieves in the neighborhood. A spark of hope flickered through the storm. I crossed the street, soaked and shaking, and knocked on his door. When Mr. Bennett opened it, his kind eyes widened at the sight of me. "Miss Hale, what on earth happened?" I swallowed hard. "I need your help," I said. "I think your camera saw everything." Mr. Bennett led me into his living room, the faint smell of coffee and old books filling the air. Without a word, he turned on his computer and pulled up the footage from the night of the storm. My hands trembled as the images appeared on screen. There it was, Olivia kneeling under the relentless rain, shivering, her lips moving as if praying. Inside, through the window, we could see the warm glow of the party. People laughed, glasses clinked. And then Mrs. Mercer's silhouette appeared. She glanced outside, saw my daughter, and turned away, her expression indifferent. Mr. Bennett muttered under his breath, "Heartless people." He copied the video to a silver USB drive, labeled it with the date, and handed it to me. "Get justice for her, Catherine," he said firmly. "That poor girl deserves it." I thanked him, clutching the small drive as if it were my daughter's heartbeat. The next morning I took it straight to attorney Rebecca Gray's office downtown. Rebecca was known for her calm intelligence and sharp instincts. She listened without interrupting as I told her everything. When I handed her the USB, she plugged it into her laptop. The video played in silence. Her eyes narrowed, her jaw tightened. "This," she said finally, "is damning evidence. But Catherine, the Mercers have money and connections. They'll fight dirty. Are you ready for that?" I met her gaze. "I've already lost my grandchild. I'm not afraid of them." She nodded. "Then we'll file for psychological abuse and damages. Leave the rest to me." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of control return. I went home that evening exhausted but strangely hopeful. But hope doesn't last long in a war against people like the Mercers. The next morning, I woke to find my living room in chaos. Drawers were open, papers scattered, the lock on the back door broken. My heart dropped as I searched frantically through my purse, then the desk. The USB was gone. So were Olivia's medical records. Before I could even call Rebecca, my phone buzzed with messages, neighbors gossiping, acquaintances whispering. Posts online claimed Olivia had faked her pregnancy to get money from her husband, that she was unstable, manipulative. They hadn't just stolen the evidence, they were stealing her truth. And I realized then, this wasn't just cruelty, it was war. That evening I sat alone in the dark, the house silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. My phone buzzed again, another message. But this one was different. No sender, no greeting. Just a single line that made my heart stop. "I have a copy of the video. Meet me at the Black Cat Cafe tomorrow at 4 p.m. Come alone." I stared at the screen, unsure whether to feel hope or fear. It could be a trap. But what choice did I have? They had taken everything, my proof, my voice, my daughter's honor. If there was even a chance this was real, I had to take it. The next afternoon, I arrived early. The Black Cat Cafe was tucked away on a quiet street downtown, its sign faded by time. I sat by the window, watching the drizzle outside, every second stretching longer than the last. At exactly 4, the door creaked open. A young woman entered, her hood pulled low, wet boots squeaking on the floor. She looked around cautiously before walking toward me. When she finally lowered her hood, I froze. It was Claire Mercer, Ethan's younger sister. She looked nothing like the polished socialite I'd seen at family dinners. Her hair was tied back carelessly, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. She sat across from me, sliding a small black USB drive onto the table. "This is what you're looking for," she said quietly. I stared at it, then at her. "Why are you doing this, Claire?" She took a shaky breath. "Because my family destroyed everything good around them. My mother controls us all like puppets. She silenced me when I wanted to become a journalist. She locked me in my room when I refused an arranged marriage. And now she's doing the same to Olivia. I can't be part of it anymore." Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with conviction. I saw everything that night. I tried to help her, but my mother locked my door from the outside. I watched Olivia kneel in the rain through my window. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached across the table and took her hand. "You did the right thing," I whispered. "You just gave my daughter her voice back." Outside, the rain had stopped, but inside I knew the real storm was about to begin. The next morning, I went straight to Rebecca's office, clutching the black USB in my hand like a lifeline. She looked up from her desk, surprised to see me so soon. When I placed the drive in front of her, she didn't ask questions. She simply plugged it in. The video played again, Olivia kneeling in the rain, the party glowing behind her, laughter echoing through the glass. Rebecca watched in silence until the end, her expression unreadable. Then she leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "They've made a critical mistake," she said. "Breaking into your home to steal evidence makes them criminals, not just defendants. And now we have proof." Her eyes sharpened. "But this fight won't be won in court alone. They've used the media to destroy you. We'll use the truth to rebuild you." That same afternoon, Rebecca arranged a meeting with journalist Daniel Ross, an investigative reporter known for exposing corruption and domestic abuse cases. He met us at a small diner near the courthouse, his camera bag slung over one shoulder. I told him everything from the night of the storm to Claire's confession. When he saw the video and the medical records Rebecca had obtained directly from the hospital database, he shook his head slowly. "This isn't just a story," he said. "It's an outrage." The next day, his article went live on a national news site under the headline, "Pregnant Woman Forced to Kneel in the Rain by Her Wealthy In-Laws." Within hours it went viral. The image of Olivia, blurred for privacy, became a symbol of silent suffering. #Justice for Olivia spread across Twitter, Facebook, and news outlets around the world. Thousands of women shared their own stories, their own scars. And then came the Mercer's response. Ethan stood before flashing cameras outside his mansion, his tie perfectly straight, his tone dripping with arrogance. "These accusations are malicious lies," he declared. "My wife has a history of emotional instability. She imagined the pregnancy. My mother and I tried to help her." I watched the broadcast with Rebecca and Daniel. My blood boiled, but Rebecca smiled faintly, calm as ever. "Let him talk," she said. "He just buried himself." Minutes later, Daniel released a second article, this time with verified hospital documentation proving Olivia's pregnancy and the cause of the miscarriage, severe hypothermia due to prolonged exposure. The tide turned overnight. The Mercer's empire of lies collapsed under the weight of truth. Reporters swarmed their gates, crowds gathered, and the once respected family became a national disgrace. And amid the chaos, I knew one thing for certain: justice was no longer a distant dream. It was on its way. The courthouse was overflowing the morning of the trial. Cameras flashed outside as reporters shouted questions, their voices echoing off the marble walls. Inside, the air was thick with tension. I sat beside Olivia, holding her cold hand in mine. Rebecca stood at the front of the courtroom, calm and poised, her notes neatly arranged on the table. When Ethan entered with his attorney, the noise outside faded into silence. He looked pale, exhausted, but still tried to force a confident smile. His mother didn't appear. Rumor had it she'd fallen ill after the scandal broke. The judge, a stern man with gray hair and sharp eyes, called for order. The proceedings began. Ethan's lawyer tried to discredit Olivia, calling witnesses who claimed she was emotional and unstable. Some even suggested she had faked her pregnancy for attention. Each lie was like a blade twisting deeper, but Rebecca never lost her composure. When it was our turn, she rose with the precision of a fighter stepping into the ring. "Your Honor," she began, "we have something that speaks louder than speculation." The lights dimmed, and the screen came alive. The video played in complete silence, Olivia kneeling in the rain, clutching her stomach, shivering, while the Mercers laughed inside. The sound of the storm filled the courtroom like a ghostly echo. Gasps rippled through the audience. Even the judge leaned forward, his jaw tightening. By the time the screen went dark, there were tears in several jurors' eyes. Then Rebecca called her final witness, Claire Mercer. Ethan's head snapped up, disbelief written across his face as his sister walked in. Dressed simply in black, she took the stand, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She told everything: the control, the cruelty, the lies. "I'm not here to destroy my family," she said. "I'm here because the truth matters. Olivia deserves justice, and so does the child she lost." Ethan's facade crumbled. His lawyer stopped objecting. The judge needed only a moment before delivering his verdict: guilty of psychological abuse and reckless endangerment resulting in harm. Ethan received a suspended prison sentence, mandatory therapy, and a substantial fine. But the real victory wasn't in the punishment, it was in the moment Olivia turned to me, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "It's over, Mom." And for the first time in months, I finally believed her. In the weeks following the trial, the chaos slowly faded. Reporters moved on to new scandals. The Mercer's mansion stood dark and quiet, and for the first time in a long while, Olivia slept through the night. Mrs. Mercer passed away not long after the verdict. Despite everything, when I heard the news, a strange sadness settled over me. Cruelty had been her armor, but I wondered what kind of pain had forged it. A week later, Claire showed up at our door. She looked thin, but lighter, freer. "I'm leaving Los Angeles," she said. "I've been accepted into a journalism program in New York. I want to do something that matters." Olivia hugged her tightly, whispering, "You already have." Life moved on, quietly but steadily. With the compensation from the court and my savings, Olivia and I rented a small space in downtown Santa Monica. She had always loved sketching clothes, and one morning over coffee, she said, "Mom, what if we opened something together?" That's how Rebirth Studio was born, a small fashion workshop dedicated to designing elegant, comfortable maternity wear. Not glamorous, not loud, but meaningful. Olivia wanted every woman who wore her designs to feel beautiful, even when carrying the weight of both life and sorrow. At first we struggled. Bills piled up, clients were scarce, but Olivia never gave up. She poured her heart into every stitch, every seam. Over time, word spread. Customers came not just for the clothes but for the kindness they found inside that little studio. I became her quiet assistant handling accounts, suppliers, and schedules. Watching her confidence return was worth more than any victory in court. Sometimes I would catch her standing by the window, gazing at the ocean. Her hand would rest on the faint scar on her forehead, and a small smile would appear. That scar used to remind me of pain. Now, it was proof of her strength. The storm had broken us once, but from its wreckage we had rebuilt something far greater ourselves. A year later, spring returned to California. The air smelled of orange blossoms and salt from the nearby ocean. One afternoon, after closing Rebirth Studio, Olivia suggested we take a walk along the Santa Monica Pier. The sky was heavy with clouds, but warm sunlight filtered through, soft and golden. Halfway down the pier, it began to drizzle a gentle, cleansing rain. We didn't run for cover. Instead, we stood there, watching the drops shimmer against the light. Then, through the thinning clouds, a rainbow appeared, arching across the horizon. Olivia looked up at it, her eyes bright, her hair damp and shining. "You know, Mom," she said softly, "for the longest time I thought I'd never feel peace again. But now I do. Thank you for fighting for me when I couldn't." I slipped my arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "I'll always fight for you, sweetheart," I whispered. "Always." We stayed there for a while, listening to the waves and the faint laughter of children nearby. It struck me how quiet the world had become. No shouting, no fear, just peace. That's when I realized something I wish every woman could know: no storm lasts forever. The truth might be buried for a time, but it never disappears. It waits for courage to uncover it. To everyone listening to this story, remember your silence protects no one. Speak up, stand tall, and never let fear steal your voice. Because after every storm, light always finds its way back.